go. And that matchup's up again, right? War Prison versus at Phoenix. We saw that in our last round that we covered, round 15, and the War Prison deck looked absolutely dominant. We're going to have to see if either Pete can find a way out of that matchup or if Frank is able to carry the day for that side.
So die roll, generally a very large percentage enabler for standard. So I think Brad is on the play. I could be wrong, though.
No, Rubin, Ingram, and Skarren are the 1 seed, so Frank is going to be on the play. There you see firing off Firebrand to start things off. Meanwhile, Brad has the turn 1 Flower to go ahead and find a basic Plains. Going to pass the turn back to Frank. Going to go ahead and attack with that Fanatical Firebrand, getting for 1 more point of damage. Tapping that 1 mountain 1 more time. Do we have another 1-drop?
To light up the stage.
Yes, it is. And we'll take a look at the top 2 cards of the library. It's going to be Shock, Runaway Steamkin. Does Frank have a second land in hand? No, he does not.
So best case scenario, Frank is only going to be able to play one of the spells off Light Up the Stage.
Here's Tithe Taker. Frank going to go ahead and take a draw. Really needs to find a mountain here. Taking a peek.
That didn't look like it.
It did not.
One of the ways that mono red aggro is able to beat up on all these other aggressive decks is because of Runaway Steamkin, how powerful it is. It's like Tarmogoyf level big in a relatively underpowered standard format, and then even if the ground gets all cluttered, you still get this dark ritual effect.
Frank having a careful think now, but this is a disastrous start for the mono red aggro deck. You can't really fault Frank for the keep. Knew he was going to go ahead and get a chance to use that Light Up the Stage. Just whiff off the top of the deck. I would also say Frank plays 21 mountains. That's kind of above average for these red lists. We see them trend much lower. Oh, we did find a second one. Okay. Now things are rolling. Here comes Runaway Steamkin. So Frank forfeited a little bit of the initiative there. Lost the play, essentially, by missing a land drop. But certainly not out of it yet.
And basically was only able to cycle his Light Up the Stage.
Not ideal.
So Steamkin is on the battlefield. That's definitely good for him. And Brad is also a little land light, missing his second land or missing his third land drop.
Well, that's going to make this game much more interesting. Neither player looking to get steamrolled here. Frank going to go ahead and take a draw.
What about Steamkind?
I'm sure Brad Carpenter isn't looking to get Steamkind. Frank would love to do some Steamkinning, though. Really wants to unlock that as a source of mana that would allow Frank to quickly move through his hand and take control of this game.
I mean, Brad's well on his way. He has a really good Convoke enabler in Amara. He has Tithe Taker, which doesn't do a whole lot in this matchup, but does give you a sticky body against things like Fanatical Firebrand.
That matters. Frank going to go ahead and cash in that Fanatical Firebrand.
Upstairs, it looked like.
Yeah.
Enable Skewer the Critics.
Light Up the Stage.
Only 3 copies in Frank's deck.
Yeah, what do you think about that decision from Frank?
I think it's one of the strongest cards in the deck.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would say if I were just making an assessment based on the numbers here, he cut the 4th Light Up the Stage for a 21st Mountain. That's kind of my read on this deck list. That's where it differs from other lists I've seen.
Oh, yeah, so he has 4 Wizards Lightning and no Skewer the Critics, just not even bothering to play with that one. Very
interesting. Frank does have another play here in Fanatical Firebrand. Going to go ahead and read that Tithe Taker.
This card has gotten me multiple times just because I forget that it actually does anything. And I'll do things like set it up so I have Growth Chamber Guardian with 3 mana untapped, and I'll pass the turn, they'll attack, and I'll try and click on my thing. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, guess what? That's not going to work because spells and abilities are going to cost 1 more. That includes Fanatical Firebrand.
And Runaway Steamkin, if that ever matters.
For sure. Very surprising effect from Tithe Taker. I don't think that's at all intuitive. Frank going to go ahead and pass the turn back to Brad. Frank is going to head into the next turn with Goblin Chain Whirler available, revealed off that Light Up the Stage, and 3 mana available as well.
Yeah, Brad knows it's coming, and I think one of the best things that Brad could do this turn is probably Conclave Tribunal to remove the Runaway Steamkin.
I like that approach. Also put another blocker on the battlefield, one with lifelink. Could be relevant.
There I am.
Welcome to the battlefield, Jerry.
I'm about to die to Chain Whirler, but it's still fine.
You had a good run.
I did. I'll be back. Don't worry.
And there goes that Runaway Steamkin. Brad going to go ahead, pass the turn over to Frank. Is it just Chain Whirler here? No thinking, slam it? Yes, it is.
Absolutely. You almost never want to give up the free card off light of the stage.
And here it's particularly impactful, killing a U as well as a Tithe Taker.
And you get to use the Fanatical Firebrand to finish off Amara, if you so please.
I think that's a good approach. Frank agrees. Going to go ahead and throw another point of damage at that Amara.
And this is it. This is what Mono Red is good at doing. Granted, Brad is stuck on mana a little bit, but Mono Red is very, very good at containing the Selesnya tokens.
Another Amara off the tap for Brad. That's a nice little find. Let's see if Frank is ready to start dealing some damage here, although Brad already at 13 life. Taking a point here, a point there. Frank has a 4th land. Certainly found his way out of those mana troubles in the early game.
Yeah, certainly before Brad did, which is huge. And Frank is already in a good spot, hoping to leverage that mana advantage. He does have an Experimental Frenzy in his hand to go along with his 4 mana, but generally you want to empty your hand first to be able to get maximum value out of that Frenzy.
Yeah, and Frank on the way to doing that. Here comes Get2 Lava Runner. Here comes a Wizard's Lightning, pointing at Amara. And here comes an attack 4-5, dropping Brad down to 8. This is basically exactly how you forecasted this game playing out, dealing with all these small threats. And that means you can't get the big threats online.
It's true, but I also didn't point out that Selesnya is just constantly mana screwed.
That is true.
That does go a long way towards helping Frank's cause and basically helped make up for his early stumble.
Yeah, you left that very important part out of the matchup. Brad's deck only 21 lands, but of course there are flowers to find additional lands.
Right, that's pretty normal.
Here's another copy of Chain Whirler. Brad says, still had all these and not the good version of that expression.
No, it was, I had all 5 drops. Frank's probably like, yeah, I know. I was here playing the game with you.
What else can you have? So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the sideboards here. Frank with 4 copies of Lava Coil, 4 copies of the Pretty Red Pony, 2 copies of Fight with Fire, 2 Treasure Map, 1 Dire Fleet Daredevil, 1 Fiery Cannonade, and 1 Banefire. I don't think there's a ton here for Frank. What do you think about Frank's options?
Lava Coil is almost certainly coming in just because it's able to deal with bigger creatures. And
Tristani.
Yeah, Mono Red basically wants as much removal as it can possibly have in the matchup. The Selesnya deck doesn't have a lot of ways to remove your key threats, and things like Viashino Pyromancer, Gitu Lava Runner, they don't brawl really well against
Easily
the Selesnya
brick-walled.
deck. Yeah, I mean, there are things like the Legion's Landing Vampire token and the Tithe Taker that we saw. So you'll probably see Frank cut some of his smaller stuff, put in some bigger things like Lava Coil. When you're on that sort of plan, I like Treasure Map as a way to filter through your deck. Look, I like Treasure Map a lot because it's really good.
#1 Treasure Map fan. That's fine. I agree with you here.
Fiery Cannonade, also very, very good.
And you mentioned that Frank is probably going to look to get away from things like Get2 Lava Runner, like Viashino Pyromancer. Does that mean the Wizard's Lightnings have to come out as well?
Yeah, because a 3-mana burn spell is not great. I mean, you already see that Frank is not playing any Skewer the Critics in his deck list, so he agrees. It's like this card is 3 mana way too often, and at that point, it's not worth it. And post-board, if you're cutting all your Wizards, then Wizard's Lightning is also not worth it. Thankfully, you're getting some upgrades like Lava Coil and Fiery Cannonade, so you don't mind all that much.
Let's cruise on over to Brad Carpenter's sideboard. There you see a copy of Crushing Canopy, 2 copies of Vivian, 2 copies of Ajani, 3 copies of Baffling End, 3 Night of Autumn, and finally 4 Kroll Harpooner. Jerry, what are you doing in Brad's spot?
I think Brad gets a little more help here, especially because there are cards in his main deck like Huatli that are pretty poor in this matchup, actually, and he gets Baffling End as early removal spells, which is very, very important against the Runaway Steamkins, and even against Goblin Chain Whirler, like the 3/3 first striking body is very relevant. Night of Autumn is decent as a life gain option, also able to pick off Experimental Frenzy, and Vivian Reed does much of the same thing, and I think you can expect both players to kind of slow down a little bit in this matchup and lean on their more powerful cards. Like Brad might even bring in like a Johnny Adversary of Tyrants.
Interesting. That's going to create a issue for Brad where the converted mana cost of his deck, the average converted mana cost, really goes up in post-board games. Still not access to a lot of mana.
Sort of. I mean, the cards that he's probably going to be shaving on are things like March of the Multitudes and like these cards that are already sort of clunky.
That makes sense. I see what you're saying. I wonder if, Jerry, this Selesnya Tokens deck is going to find any new options in War of the Spark. The set that no one can stop talking about, loaded with Planeswalkers. We don't know what it's going to bring to the table yet. I can't wait to find out. Make sure you get in your pre-orders today. You can head over to go.starcitygames.com/war. It's going to ship Friday, May 3rd. We're almost in preview season already. I can't wait to start getting preview cards for War of the Spark. We're going to get to talk about them on StarCityGames.com in our weekly articles that we both write on the premium side. We'll talk about them over on the Game podcast. Preview season is just like the most joyous time of the year. It's basically what I live for as a Magic player.
You just get presents.
Yeah, every day you wake up to some new present. And you get to think about it for the entirety of the day, and you're like weird and pacing around your house while you just build decks in your mind, and your wife's like, "What's wrong with you right now?" I'm like, no, just new Magic cards.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
Nothing is wrong. Everything is great.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure War of the Spark will deliver on the goodies. You see both players finalizing their sideboarding right now. This is the only game to have been decided thus far. Nothing from those back tables yet. Kind of makes sense. As we said, Zan can take a while to win. Death and Taxes versus Is It Delver. We saw Death and Taxes get bogged down in some absolutely marathon games, and certainly could be going on right now in
Mono
that matchup.
White Control.
Aptly named. I mean, it's been a pretty big weekend for Death and Taxes, I would say.
It's a nice resurgence.
Were you expecting to have that kind of breakout performance coming into this weekend?
Not necessarily. It's always weird because you can never really predict when those sort of metagame shifts are going to take place. Like, I think this weekend a lot of people got off of Is It Phoenix and started playing things like Tron, and that is more of a thing that we kind of saw coming. It was just a matter of time, really.
Yeah.
And Legacy, there haven't been enough high-level events to be like, okay, now is finally a great time for Death and Taxes. But a lot of players independently came up with the notion that Death and Taxes would be well-positioned this weekend. And there were some people like Ethan Gajewski saying that he played against the mirror match 5 times or something throughout the course of the tournament. So there were probably a lot of them in attendance.
I think you're right. We're taking a look right now at Frank Skarren, 28 years old, hometown of Merrick, New York. In 2018, only played 4 opens, still managed to grab a top 8. Meanwhile, all-time 5 open top 8s, as well as an invitational top 8. There you see his favorite foods, Indian food and sushi.
Also has a classic title.
What's in the SCG Classics.
Yeah.
Standard, right? He may have several titles, actually, now that I
Maybe.
think about it. I remember him doing well with Golgari at one point. I think he's got a mono-red title, so it wouldn't be surprising if Frank is actually taking down a few classics now.
I know he won a classic with a mono-red deck. I don't remember if it was mono-red Phoenix or just normal mono-red standard. I think it was the standard.
Okay. Frank, also a talented League of Legends player. We've played before. Hard carried me with Tryndamere, just like 5v1ing the other team. I'm also fairly terrible and easily impressed, but still. Meanwhile, over in the modern match, Syed has taken down Pete Ingram in Game 1. 1-0 is the current game count there.
Not surprising.
I agree. This is a deck that kind of hard targets Is It Phoenix, and Pete's going to have to go ahead and scramble to try and find a win in those post-board games. We saw how difficult it was once those ensnaring bridges and all the protection for them starts coming down. And when the Jester's cap hits the battlefield, all bets are off. There's nothing you can do at that point.
It's game over. It just strips your outs completely.
Yeah. But that's what Jester's cap does. Number 1 card in Ice Age. Not like that unplayable Necropotent. It's clearly the worst card. These are some real inside baseball jokes right now. Unless you read that issue of Inquest 25 years ago, you have virtually no idea what I'm talking about. Brad Carpenter going to go ahead and lead on a Temple Garden. It's going to cast Flower.
Taking 2 damage.
Little painful. Not exactly what you want to do on turn 1.
Either land light, could be a bunch of Sun Petal Groves, or could be a bunch of Temple Gardens. One of the two.
Frank, no 1-drop. That makes sense, though. As you mentioned, looking to get a little bit bigger in post-board games. Here's a follow-up Sun Petal Grove. Here's a Tithe Taker. Going to go ahead and pass the turn back to Frank. Can't respond to that due to the Tithe.
Gotta pay.
Mm-hmm. Frank carefully considering options on turn 2 now.
Tithe Taker is a pretty reasonable Lava Coil target. Maybe not ideal. You might be a little bit more worried about a 4 toughness creature.
Mm-hmm. Well, Frank agrees with you. Going to go ahead and fire off a Lava Coil and deal with that Tithe Taker, making sure it doesn't get to add a spirit to the battlefield. Meanwhile, Brad, with a big 3-drop, it's History of Benalia going to go ahead and put a 2/2 Vigilance Knight onto the battlefield, pass the turn, back over to Frank. Frank takes a draw.
History of Benalia, one of the stronger cards in the matchup. Not only are you getting multiple bodies from one card, it's multiple bodies that don't die to Goblin Chain Whirler. And granted, if Chain Whirler comes down, it's still able to block the Knights, but it gives you a way to build your board and work towards things like Tristani and March of the Multitudes.
Yeah, absolutely. Not many sweepers in Frank's configuration.
Boom! We're going hunting.
Jerry's favorite card has entered the battlefield. Let's let him have a good time for a while. I had my moment with Jester's Cap. You can have your moment with Treasure Map.
My artifact is way better than yours.
I can't argue against you, unfortunately. I just have to concede this one. Yeah, but do you remember when Jester's Cap made that 1/1 creature? That was cool stuff.
It was not bad.
Here comes another knight from the History of Benalia. Meanwhile, over in the Legacy matchup, Austin Collins up a game.
That's kind of crazy. You don't expect the Delver deck to be able to win what seemed like a pretty long, drawn-out game. If the game's going long, you would expect the Death and Taxes deck to just be like slowly tightening the noose.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. I will also say that these three players, Rubin, Ingram, and Skarren, they communicate a lot. They take their time. They think very carefully. So even though it's been some amount of time, about 15 minutes since the match started, they don't necessarily have to be that far along in turns. Very deliberate players.
They are not the ones who got 2 draws in the Swiss. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that. Meanwhile, great follow-up here from Brad Carpenter. The first History of Benalia. It's the second History of Benalia. Exactly what you want to do. Chaining those histories together. Frank just going to go ahead and put the first activation into that treasure map.
And now you got to do some work. You have to figure out exactly the best way to be able to clear up these Knights. If you're able to not die, he's going to have a nice little reload once Treasure Map transforms into Treasure Cove. So he's kind of got like the mid to long game covered. Obviously, the Celestia Tokens deck goes a little bit bigger with March of the Multitudes and Tristani Discordant. Those are definitely very important cards.
So Brad going to go ahead and tick up that first History of Benalia, putting the trigger on the stack. Ordered it correctly, now going to get to keep a knight in the face of Frank's Fiery Candidate. That's a one-of in the list, and that was very much needed right there.
Yeah, that's a heads-up thing by Brad where it is just a one-of card. You might not even think to play around it, right?
I think it costs very little to play around it, so good play on Brad's part. Jared, you know what's a really good follow-up to the second History of Benalia?
Tristani.
Well, yes, but also, also third History of Benalia.
That was my next guess.
Yeah, they're both good. I would take either. But Brad able to quickly rebuild in the face of that Fiery Candidate. You can't fault Frank, though. I mean, just had to fire that off.
Otherwise, you're taking 12 damage.
Yep.
You have to have the massive amount of discipline to be able to wait on that. And even then, there's still no guarantee that you're going to be able to win as a result of killing 5 tokens.
Yeah, Brad can just do nothing on his turn. Doesn't have to play that next history.
Right.
So Frank goes ahead and activates that treasure map one more time. I think he liked what he found on top. Going to go ahead and take a draw. Access to more mana now on this turn, if Frank so chooses. Can activate that treasure map one more time and get those 3 treasures into play. Looks like not quite yet, though. We have a 2-drop. It's going to be Runaway Steamkin.
That's a start.
What's the follow-up?
And if Frank was just building up a bunch of small spells, this could certainly be pretty good for him, where he can pick off some of the smaller creatures, build a larger blocker, and then be able to turtle up behind this treasure map a little bit.
Yeah, here's a shock on the Amara. Does Frank have another play here? Just going to go ahead and pass the turn, maybe prioritizing getting that treasure map fully and completely online. Let's see what Brad has here. Going to go ahead and resolve that pump again from the history. Put another knight into play. Takes a draw. Here come those 2 history tokens. They're going to get in for 8 damage. Frank Skarren going to fall to 10. Jerry, you know what's a good follow-up to the third History of Benalia?
What, Brian?
You're about to see it right now. The 4th History of Benalia. Just draw them all. Why not?
That's a playset.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Look, if Frank is able to overcome 4 History of Benalias, I just don't know. That's not something I expect his deck to be capable of. And Brad going to go ahead and deploy a Saproling Migration as the last card in hand. So Brad out of gas, but still with 2 History of Benalias on the battlefield. Here's that treasure map. Going to go ahead and get the last activation in. Take a scry. Put 3 treasures into play. Going to have access to some card advantage on the next turn. Extra mana on the next turn. Let's see if Frank is able to convert that to a safe battlefield.
Fiery Cannonade is off the table. It has already been used. History of Benalia is going to pump up the 4 night tokens to the point where Runaway Steamkin can't effectively block them. The Saplings are just going to get blocked by anything. So I think it'll be pretty easy for Frank to have a way to deal with those, but really think he needs to deal with like 2 knights this turn potentially.
Chain Whirler removal spell would be absolutely amazing.
Double Chain Whirler?
Also amazing. That's probably just game over, quite frankly.
Yes.
Let's see what Frank has. Having a think. Going to go ahead and activate that treasure map draw card. Peels 1 off the top. Can't quite make out what's in Frank's hand here. There's the first Chain Whirler. That's going to clean up those Saplings, provide a little blocking. Very nice.
Deal 1 to Brad. That's a start.
Yeah, damage is good.
Light up the stage. Ooh.
Fanatical Firebrand.
That kills a knight at least.
Yes, it does. It also makes the Steamkin a little bit larger. Access to more mana if Frank decides he needs it.
Modern Classic competitors.
I hope he's slow rolling the second Chain Whirler.
Oh, that would be such brutal beats.
We have the top 8.
You got to go ahead and fire off this Firebrand here, right?
In first place with 23
Brad thinking he needs to shift to defensive posture now. It's a dramatic change, and I don't think it's one that's going to go well for Brad. I understand feeling the pressure here. Thinking carefully about a double block, maybe a triple block.
Daniel Weiser.
No, ultimately is going to pass. Just takes 4 damage.
It's tempting to kill the Steamkin because it's so
I know.
strong, but you have 16 power ready to come in next turn. You just take the 4. Absolutely.
Here are 3 more mana in Frank's mana pool. Going to go ahead and fire off a shock. Kills another knight.
2 red floating.
What is the play with this last 2 red?
And in 8th place.
There's another knight off the battlefield. Goblin Chain Whirler ready to block one of them.
Judges, please pace.
Frank might have done it here. He might have faded 4 History of Benalias.
I announce your name and you have not
He did draw his 1 of Fiery Cannonade.
Sure,
That did help.
Look.
That helped a lot.
but that cleaned up the equivalent of about 1 history, and there's still 3 more that he had to deal with. Here's a Viashino Pyromancer going to throw some damage over at Brad. Present a body to block.
Suddenly, the game's a lot closer. Life totals 10 to 11.
Wild stuff here. Oh, nice draw off the top from Brad. Trostani.
That's not bad.
Yeah, about as good as it gets. You see Brad quite pleased with it. Going to put a couple Jerrys into play. Those are some big tokens now. Big, big tokens.
Now, 5 force for the turn, just tough enough to get through that Goblin Chain Whirler. Also attacking for lethal, so Frank has to block or remove a token with something.
We're just going to see a chump block here.
It's understandable. Frank goes down to 5, but there's still that other history, the 4th history, ready to pump these knights again.
Wild. I mean, I think if that Trostani wasn't on the top of the deck, Frank might have done it, but could be too much to overcome the perfect top deck there from
A lot
Brad.
of powerful mythic rares
Oh, yeah.
in Selesnya.
Absolutely. Frank going to go ahead and activate that flip treasure map one more time. Takes a draw. Treasure Cove, right? That's the flip side of the
Yep.
treasure map. You would know, of course.
I've read that card many times.
Have
both sides.
Flipped more treasure maps than anyone on the planet.
That might be true, actually. It honestly might.
Here comes the Lava Coil on the Trostani. That's a good start.
If Frank had that last turn, that is some impressive restraint.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another Pyromancer. 2 more damage over to Brad. Still a scary attack coming in on this next turn, but one that Frank can now survive. Last card in hand for Frank is just a mountain. Going to go ahead, pass the turn, back to Brad. Does Brad have another one stacked on the top of the deck?
Well, Brad now knows that with Frank, no cards in hand, he can make an attack where all of the knights have to get blocked. If a knight and a GRET token go unblocked, that is lethal.
Yeah,
So
I would
he-
expect everyone to ship here.
He knows how combat's going to shake out.
Yep.
Chain Whirler's going to eat a token. Steamkin's going to trade with one. Vishino Pyromancer's going to chump block. Frank's going to take 2, and Brad's going to gain 2 also.
Yep. Life swing very relevant there. And this is our new battlefield now. Did you catch the card there from Brad?
No.
Modern classic top 8 competitor.
It's a Venerated Loxodon.
That's not bad.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The far corner of the room where
Frank is going to get access to 2 cards on this turn, but they're going to have to be 2 real good ones.
I mean, if he finds a way to deal with the Loxodon, he's not facing down lethal.
No, that's true.
So Lava Coil, another Chain Whirler would be pretty good.
What did we find for Frank? Tapping 1 mana.
Yeah, Firebrand's also pretty good.
Stays alive.
4
Here's
mana?
a bunch of mana, and there's Experimental Frenzy.
That's huge.
If Frank makes it through this turn, he is in incredible position. Loads of mana in play. Brad Carpenter, hellbent, no cards in hand. Brad's going to take a draw here. What was it off the top?
This game has been sick.
Yeah, very good game. This is the games that Standard is capable of. They can be very swingy, very one-sided, very snowbally, but when you get into a good one, they look like this, and it's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of combat math, a lot of picking and choosing, especially from Frank's side, on like what spells do you use on which creatures.
Right. All right, Frank going to have to line up some blocks here. Assuming we're going to take out the larger soldier. We're probably going to chump block on the Loxodon. Throw some damage out of Jerry T. Yep.
Ow.
Take that, Jerry. There we go. Frank only taking 1 damage on this turn. Taking out a couple of creatures. Keeping that Chain Whirler in play. Setting up for a massive turn. I think Brad's draw was a split card. I think it might have been Flower Flourish.
Okay. I mean, if that's the case, it's possible that Brad should have not attacked that turn because he basically traded 2 creatures for a Fanatical Firebrand and a point of damage.
Maybe. Let's see what Frank has on the top. How about Goblin Chain Whirler killing another Jerry T?
That makes the attack fine because he would have lost the tokens anyways.
Yep. Follow up, Runaway Steamkin. Oh, things are happening now for Frank. Big things are happening. Here's the mountain.
Is Frank going to stop? Is he going to slow down at all?
Oh, there's no reason to slow down once you're Experimental Frenzying, except for a land on the top of your library once you've already played one. All right, tapping some mana here. Baffling End. Going to go ahead and take care of that Chain Whirler.
It's good, but it's not going to do enough, I don't think. This
Double block here. Happy to trade resources at this point. I still think that's the Flower Flourish in hand. Not 100% on that, but it makes sense given how the game's played out. There's a mountain on top of the deck. Not what you want to see. Second Experimental Frenzy, completely dead. Not good.
It's not completely dead.
Third Experimental Frenzy.
I will argue the third one is dead.
Okay.
But this gives you insurance in case Brad peels like a Vivian or something like that he sideboarded in to be able to kill the Experimental Frenzy.
Okay, not a great turn there from Frank. Going to have to pass the turn back. And it looks like Saproling Migration was the draw.
Yeah, Brad's trying to set up the Wombo combo finish, make 2 1/1s, give them +2/+2.
Funny, Brad actually coming up a mana short a couple times here. Would love to kick the Saproling Migration. Would have loved to just win the game with the Flower Flourish on the turn he drew it. But like I said, a mana short. And let's see if the Experimental Frenzies are going to betray Frank one more time. There's the 4th copy. Wow. So Brad draws 4 copies of History of Benalia. Frank draws all 4 Experimental Frenzies.
And facing down lethal.
Okay, but we're tapping 3 mana here. And you know what 3 mana usually means. No.
Light up the stage.
Light up the stage.
So in response to the light up the stage, he still looks at the top card of his deck with Experimental Frenzy. If it's a burn spell, he might want to cast it.
Okay. We've revealed Steamkin, Firebrand off Light Up the Stage.
So you have 2 blockers.
Right. Looks like we're alive. Here comes that Steamkin. Here comes the Firebrand putting a token on.
And this is crazy. This is the ridiculous stuff that this mono-red aggro deck is capable of doing. You wouldn't expect mono-red to be able to play this long of a game, especially against a green-white token deck.
No,
that's
absolutely.
several times over the course of the game, Brad played cards that effectively gave him card advantage, and now Frank is just outdrawing Brad with treasure maps, experimental frenzies, has like 10 lands in play.
Here's a Conclave Tribunal off the top. That's going to go ahead and remove that Steamkin, get in for 1 lonely point of damage. Frank falls to 1. Game balanced on a knife's edge right now.
We've seen this before with the white aggressive decks like Azorius Aggro. Get your opponent to 1. It's not the same as 0. You have no reach.
Yep.
You have to deal all of your combat damage with creature, or all of your lethal damage with creatures.
So I don't know what's in Frank's hand. Can't have more than 11 lands left in the deck. 0 experimental frenzies left in the deck.
Ooh.
There's Lightning Strike off the top. Next card revealed.
That was an upkeep Lightning Strike.
Correct. Getting maximum usage off those frenzies. Here's Lightning Strike you. Brad going to fall to 8. Take a look at the next card. Lightning Strike you. Brad going to fall to 5. What's next? 1 mana. Light up the stage. Take a peek before we resolve. Frank says, I'm cool with it. Mountain. Lava Coil. Nothing to deploy quite yet, but there's the top of the deck again. 1 more light up the stage. Take a look at the top card. Decide if he wants to cast it right now. Another Lightning Strike. Another Lightning Strike. Brad falls to 2. And now we're going to go ahead and resolve this light up the stage. Runaway Steamkin. Shock ready on the next turn. And what can Brad do here? He has nothing, right? There's nothing that can get him out of this situation.
No, I don't think so. That's
He agrees. He scoops.
Combo deck.
And Frank Skarren takes down the match 2-0. What a wild game that was. So, obviously, this match still being contested right now. I think we're going to go ahead and head into the Legacy game, which is tied at 1 game apiece right now between Austin Collins and Steve Rubin. Sounds like they haven't quite started Game 3 yet, so we're going to get to look at the entire thing, I believe. Incredible match from Frank there, beating 4 History of Banaliers. Are you kidding me?
Red Master.
Very well played. Even getting through that bad patch of luck where it was just experimental frenzy after experimental frenzy off the top of his library.
Yeah, I mean, Frank never really hit the pockets of land that generally punish you.
Yeah, that's true. While he hit pockets of experimental frenzies, no pockets of land.
But at least that you can pay 4 mana to cycle.
No, that's true. That's true. It will float off the top of the deck eventually.
And then if you ever want to cash in those frenzies and make use of your hand that has been stockpiling up over the last few turns, it's really tough.
Right. It becomes complicated once you've stacked them all on the battlefield.
Still worth it, I would say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just need to see the next card in your deck there. So I see some shuffling going on over in the Modern match. We'll get an update for you, exactly what's happening there. I see Pete heading back into the sideboard. That leads me to believe that maybe he took that game too. And I have confirmation. That match will also be headed to Game 3. Is it Phoenix versus War Prison?
War Prison undeniably strong against Is It Phoenix, but by no means is it a lock. You know, you're not going to win every single game. You can stumble. Is It Phoenix does have a lot of strong sideboard options against the deck. It's not a guarantee.
Right. No locks against a deck like Is It Phoenix. It has access to so many cards over the course of the game. If you just have a one-of in your sideboard that can get you out of sticky situations, you have a good chance of finding it. And I believe Pete did come prepared with a Shatterstorm in his sideboard this weekend, so that's a big, big play against these War Prison decks. Looks like players are resolving mulligans right now over in our Legacy matchup. You see Steve Rubin having to think. I believe Rubin on 6, Collins on 7.
Austin Collins just never looks phased, man.
No, demeanor of an old veteran at only 16, right?
16 yeah, 16 years old. He's about to be 17, I believe.
Incredible stuff, really.
Bring back the JSS.
I do think the JSS is very much missing from Magic right now, but in Austin's case, doesn't matter. He's just going to win all the regular tournaments. Doesn't need a junior circuit. Austin going to go ahead and lead on Terramander here. Turn 1 Terramander.
It probably also wouldn't be very fun for him. I think he is up to the challenge, you know?
Might be a little bit of easy mode. Rubin going to go ahead and try and stick a Mother of Runes. Collins has the answer with a Daze. And here is that Pteramander flying in for 1 point of damage. Austin just going to redeploy the island, pass the turn back to Steve Rubin.
If there's one thing that has been a constant this weekend in Legacy, it is how much the format has shifted towards players willing to play with basic lands and just like actively wanting to play with basic lands. There are so many things just like Wasteland, back to basics that are incredibly common in the format that it's eventually it circles around to where basic island is the technology card, you know?
Yeah, Legacy also prone to the same rotations as our non-Eternal formats. It takes a little bit longer. These Eternal formats, people have investments in their deck, both monetarily and just personal investment. You really care about your archetype in a lot of instances. So it takes longer to get off something. You see players like, say, Tan and Grace, who's played the same archetype for basically ever. So change is slow to come, but it does happen, and we're seeing that right now with Izzet Delver. Printing of Pteramander certainly having something to do with that.
Well, a lot of players actually questioning their own inclusion of the card Pteramander this weekend. Said it had underperformed basically because the mana investment was too high.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. You're of the opinion that they need to work a little bit harder. Am I right?
I think so. I mean, I'm not going to say that Pteramander is a bad card because it certainly isn't.
Yeah, maybe it's time for Thought Scour, Mental Note, some kind of way of powering up those Pteramanders a little bit. Austin Collins, though, registering Pteramander on back-to-back weekends with no complaints. So.
A lot of dazes.
Yeah.
Interesting that Austin brainstormed back a volcanic island, fetched it, and just blatantly revealed that it was the card on top. And then cast Daze and left the non-basic in play for Steve to Wasteland. Just saying, like, please, come on. Please sacrifice your land to kill mine.
Steve found a powerful, powerful play here. A Chalice of the Void on one, but Austin basically has the best possible response. He says, how about a 2-drop in the form of Young Pyromancer?
I mean, this is another good one. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Agreed. Agreed. Here's a Ponder that's going to go ahead and flip that Delver of Secrets.
But not do much more past that. Ponder's going to cost 2 mana and get countered by Chalice and only make a 1/1 elemental.
Yeah. Pretty small game there. That Delver, though, looking to get on the beatdown plans. Rubin now cutting off access to his own Swords to Plowshares, but Rubin's deployed a lot of 1-drops thus far. Has played 2 Swords, 1 Mother of Runes. Hopefully gotten most of those 1-drops out of hand. Here you see Stoneforge Mystic. If this can acquire one of the big equipments, maybe a Jite, this is going to be a huge swing in the matchup. Collins, though, with the response, it's going to be Force of Will.
Yeah, exile that Ponder. That's not really necessary.
Yeah, that was a big play there. The game could have changed very quickly if Stoneforge Mystic had resolved. Meanwhile, turn's going to pass back to Collins. There you see that Delver of Secrets flying over the battlefield once more, hitting for 3 damage. Rubin going to go ahead and take a draw. Love to find some answer to that Delver of Secrets. Palace Jailer or something like that, where he can start turning the corner in this matchup.
Even Flicker Wisp, some sort of flying blocker would even be
right.
Completely fine. Thalia is holding off the Young Pyromancer and the Elemental tokens. Probably going to be the case for a while, especially with Chalice turning off, at the very least, the vast majority of Austin's removal spells, like ways to remove that Thalia. Yeah, and honestly, Austin doesn't have many castable spells, period.
Right. Yeah, Chalice long been a powerful, powerful play. Looks like we're going to see a Sanctum Prelate from Steve Rubin. That's going to demand some action from Austin Collins as well. He's going to go ahead and cast a Lightning Bolt. That's going to be countered by the Chalice of the Void. It is going to put a token into play. And I think Rubin has that Prelate in play. We'll have to get a read on exactly what that's naming.
Yeah, it's interesting because the...
Looks like 2.
Okay.
Now I have to ask, what can Austin Collins still cast? True Name Nemesis.
Force of Will.
Force of Will. If he's got Is It Static Caster in from the sideboard, which he almost certainly should.
Yep.
Can cast Is It Static Caster. That's it, I'm out. Entrancing Melody. He has a copy of Entrancing Melody in the sideboard. And that's going to be about it for Austin Collins in this game. But at the crucial moment when Palace Jailer is ready to come down, he does have another Force of Will. Exactly what he needed in this situation.
Yeah, very few relevant cards actually left in his deck, and Austin is just doing his best.
Yeah, making it work, absolutely. And Rubin has to be sweating a little bit. That life total's getting low. Here's a Wasteland on the port. Looking to keep Rubin off that key 4th mana that could deploy the Palace Jailer.
So Insectile Aberration is going to go unblocked for sure to put Steve down to 9. And then it's just a question of whether or not you offer up the Young Pyromancer to the Thalia, the Elemental to the Prelate, and try and get in 2 damage.
Here's the Chain Lightning. It is going to be countered, of course, by the Chalice of the Void, but another counter enters, or excuse me, another token enters the battlefield from the Young Pyromancer. Just going to attack with the Delver this turn.
So Steve Rubin down to 6, and Austin threatening a lethal attack next turn. Steve with not a whole lot of gas left over either. Like
No, just 1 card in hand.
the card that he has left over needs to be able to impact the board.
It's a Caracas. Not going to do a whole lot. What's the other card in hand?
See some whispers going on.
There's the legendary land. Here is Recruiter of the Guard. What can Rubin find here? Does he have time to make this card work?
Yeah, it's a little slow. Can certainly pick up a copy of Flicker Wisp and reset the Delver if you want to, while also just having a flying blocker.
All right, that's an option. Something like Palace Jailer to remove a threat. I don't think that's going to be enough to stay alive here. Let's see. 5 attackers in play, would have 4 blockers. Well, he thinks Palace Jailer might get the job done.
Pete does not like it.
Magic player Patrick Porter to table.
It's interesting.
So Austin very likely to draw a blank piece of cardboard.
Almost certainly.
Maybe he draws a thing that makes a 1/1 elemental token, which could change things. But otherwise, you would likely see him attacking with everyone and putting Steve down to 1 life. And then Steve will untap, play Palace Jailer, exile the Insectile Aberration, and have 3 blockers still left over. So that would keep him alive.
It would. That assumes blank cardboard here from Austin Collins. Like we said, there's a lot of it in the deck. But we don't know that's going to be the case. Let's see what the play is here from Collins. Measuring out some attacks. It's got to be all or nothing, right? It's either everyone swinging or no one is.
I think so. Like,
besides the Delver, of course.
the Aberration has to attack.
Right.
You know you're going to lose it to Palace Jailer next turn. And then what are you doing? You're just hanging out while your opponent has your 1 and 2 mana cards locked out and is now the Monarch?
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a way to win this game long term. But what does an all-out attack really do to win the game as well? I mean, I think he's just like, if he drew a blank, that all-out attack does not work here. And I think that's the case. Rubin going to get a chance to put a Palace Jailer on that Delver. Here it comes. Going to become the Monarch as well. Start drawing some cards. And with the vast majority of Collins' deck turned off.
I see Austin's plan.
What do you got for me?
He can all-in attack this turn, deal a damage, take
Okay.
the Monarch,
Take
back,
Monarch back?
get the Delver back.
Okay. Here's a Lightning Bolt. That's going to create an additional token here. Collins takes another draw. Have an update from the other side of the bracket. It sounds like Minor, Ambrosio, and Crespo Jr. going to be heading on to the finals. They defeated Zhao, Clark, and Foe in our semifinals. All that's left to determine is who's coming out of this matchup. Colin's going to go ahead and ship with everyone here, except that young Pyromancer holding it back. Rubin lining up some blocks. Delver of Secrets is reclaimed. Colin's going to go ahead and draw a card.
And he is now the Andrew Jessup.
Very nice position to be in. Let's see if Rubin finds a way to reclaim the throne in this turn. Draws a card there. I missed exactly what it was. I think it was a land.
Oh, you can reclaim the Monarch, but I'm not sure how much good it's actually going to do you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, the Monarch should be super punishing, but like we've mentioned, most of Austin Collins' deck right now is just blank. Does almost nothing. He's basically burning spells in an effort to just put more and more Pyromancer tokens into play.
Steve Rubin has effectively cast Humility on all of Austin's spells.
Yeah. Impressive conversion.
So, see a Wasteland from Steve Rubin. That is certainly going to take away Austin's second land, his only source of red, but realistically it doesn't matter all that much.
Just about Delver Flipper, no?
Pretty much. And I think Austin is going to have a few turns to actually see if he can hit it. Steve gets to attack with a couple creatures here. Those are probably just going to get through. He's going to reclaim the Monarch. He can Caracas his own Thalia and replay it if he wants to.
Colin says, yep. You're the Monarch now, dog.
Can't win if I block.
Does Rubin want to take this Thalia line to have an untapped blocker?
Well, he needs an additional blocker.
He agrees. Thalia returned to hand, redeployed. What is the last card in hand? I want to know so badly.
For Steve?
Yeah, Rubin's going to take a draw here. It was just another land. Austin reveals the top card of the library. It is going to go ahead and flip that Delver. It's going to rumble into the red zone, and that gets the handshake from Steve Rubin. An incredibly, incredibly tight game between Steve Rubin and Austin Collins.
All coming down to a Delver flip.
Yeah.
Obviously, there was a lot leading up to it where Austin's just like, look, this is my game plan. I have to throw away these lightning bolts just to make 1/1s and amass an army that allowed him to steal the Monarchy back, get his Delver of Secrets back. He played to his outs. He played well.
I think it was very well executed. I think Austin identified how he could possibly win the matchup and delivered on it. So that means we are going to have a third and final deciding game against Peter Ingram against Syed. Is it Phoenix versus War Prison? One more time for all the marbles, for all the Jester's caps, if you will, determining who goes on to the finals.
How many Jester's caps could a team buy if they won the team open?
So many. They should basically be free at this point.
Maybe not after this tournament.
I do not know what an Ice Age Jester's cap currently costs. It's not enough, whatever it is. Syed just going to go ahead and lead with a fetch land here, passes the turn over to Ingram. Looks like Spire Bluff Canal.
You keep entertaining the fine folks at home. I'm going to look up Jester's cap.
Okay, this is what the folks really want to know, though. They really want to know how much does Jester's cap cost currently. There's no way they could possibly get that information other than us delivering it directly to them. Ingram going to go ahead and fire off Faithless Looting here. There you see perhaps one of the key cards in the matchup. It's a Pyromancer's Ascension. Fine win condition through those Ensnaring Bridge.
You see, I happen to know a website where you can look up both the prices of cards and to see whether or not they have any cards available for sale.
Tell me about that website.
It's called StarCityGames.com.
Okay, and what do they want for one beautiful Ice Age Jester's cap?
Unfortunately, they're currently out of stock.
Bad news.
For near mint, $4.99.
Okay.
A played copy, run you about $4.
Feels like a steal, honestly. That's the #1 card in Ice Age. I don't know if you read Inquest magazine, but it's been reported at this point. So Ingram did resolve Faithless Looting on his turn, pass the turn back to Zan, who's going to just go get a Shock Land, tapped, of course, not taking any damage. Follow up, Dark Slick Shores.
An awkward pair of discards for Pete also.
Yeah, interesting ones. I think we're going to see Pyromancer's Ascension here. Ingram trying to rely on that win condition, as we saw these Phoenix decks often have to do in these matchups against War Prison.
I mean, Ascension has been touted as the mirror breaker. I think it's also the whir breaker.
It could be. But here's a little bit of combo action from Zen, already with Thopter Sword online.
I love it.
Let's see how aggressive Zan gets with this Thopter Sword combo. He's played very conservatively with it thus far, and I think almost always correctly so.
Yeah, you saw Pete discard a Surgical Extraction. Generally, you have to be concerned that there's another one waiting in the wings.
I think that's fair, especially given the Pyromancer Ascension would be very incentivized to get that card in the graveyard right away.
Now it comes down to sequencing.
Right.
Pete's got some spells.
He's going to have active Pyromancer Ascension this turn.
Deck makes it look easy.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Here's the Faithless Looting. That's the first counter on Pyromancer Ascension.
Basically comes down to 3v3 in the truest sense. All teammates talking to each other, trying to figure out what's going on. They eventually decide to discard Serum Visions and an Island. So no value off these Faithless Lootings.
Yeah, this is a team that communicates a lot. As I said, they will talk about every decision, and every player will weigh in.
Pete's leaning over. He's like, yo, are we going to play League later?
I think the answer was absolutely. Pete going to go ahead and pass the turn back to Zan here. Zan with no activations of the Thopter Sword on Pete's end step. Here's a Nile Spellbomb.
That's good.
Could be very good.
Not only does it get rid of the flashback on these Faithless Lootings, but can potentially stop the Pyromancer Ascension from getting that second counter.
The problem is Surgical Extraction in hand, ready to go for Pete Ingram right now. Thinking about responding to that Spellbomb, is going to do so. Here's Surgical Extraction, targeting Misty Rainforest. Pete says, I need those out of your deck, stat.
We've seen this a few times where people are very gung-ho with their Surgical Extractions and just automatically take all the copies out of the deck. But I feel like in this instance specifically,
You want to leave the cards in the deck.
if Zan has more copies of Misty Rainforest, just leave them.
I agree. I think you're exactly right. Let's see if Pete comes to the same conclusion.
Get to take a gander, figure out how your opponent's sideboarded. You get to see all the cards in their hand. You already know how Zan was proceeding, where he wasn't making Thopters, fearing Surgical Extraction.
Right. Zan's
now-
hand comprised of what looks like Ensnaring Bridge, Muddle the Mixture, and can you make out that last card in
War of
hand?
Invention.
Okay.
So Pete has all the information at that point. He also has an active Pyromancer Ascension, and I don't know what Zan wants to do. He's got Muddle the Mixture to maybe protect his Thopter Sword combo from a third Surgical. Is that possible? Pete's got 3 in his deck.
It is in fact possible. Pete playing 3 Surgicals in the main deck. I highly doubt any left. Also, let's not forget Pete packing 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage. So just because those cards are in the graveyard doesn't mean Pete doesn't have access to them.
That's what Nile Spellbomb's for.
Well, certainly some value there. There's a lot that Nile Spellbomb can do in this matchup, right? One of the reasons why you're so high on this card right now. Basically covers all the angles of attack that this deck could present.
Yeah, and this deck does it better than anyone, where it's also an artifact for Mox Opal, Thopter Foundry,
Yep.
just all sorts of stuff. It's a card that you can play out proactively to lower your hand size for Ensnaring Bridge, and then if you want to crack it to draw a card at a later time, cool. Just does it all.
We are going to go ahead and activate that Spellbomb here. Zan going to take a draw. Did Pete take out the additional copies of Misty, or did he leave them in there? I only see 1 at the top of the deck.
He just went through the deck. How
Okay.
many Misties are in there?
Let's check on that.
Not that relevant, but still interested. 2.
Only 2 in the deck.
Peter going off. Thought Scour. Copy it.
Unfortunately, drew the Phoenix. We've seen that several times on this weekend. Fire off those Thought Scours and the draw. Always Arclight Phoenix for some reason.
Well, normally you had those Faithless Lootings to flash back, but, Zan's being a jerk, busting up his graveyard, trying to stop Pete from having fun.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what Zan needs to do here.
Pete pointing at the Thopter Foundry. Well, what do you think's going to happen now?
He's like, this is a problematic card.
Yeah. This is good. Should stay banned.
Well, we've seen this a few times this weekend. Manamorphose with a Pyromancer's Ascension active. That's going to go ahead and generate a bunch of mana, draw a couple cards. Powerful, powerful stuff.
There's probably no better feeling in Modern, right? And
I don't think so. Pete now resolved both copies. Drew 2 lands. A little bit out of gas here. Never mind. Here's an opt. That's the thing, is you could be out of gas if you have a Pyromancer's Ascension. You just need one cantrip, and you're going to find something to do with your mana. And there you see Chandra, Torch of Defiance. How does that compare to Keranos?
favorably.
Okay. I'm with you.
Also, opt compared to sleight of hand in that situation, I think was about the same because Pete basically knew that he was looking for action, right? It doesn't matter if it's the top or the second card, whatever. Like, he is looking for something very specific. He bottomed both, and now he's just going to continue to go off. First Arclight Phoenix in the graveyard. Second copy of Arclight Phoenix in the graveyard. Another Manamorphose, too, for Pete.
That was some beautiful thought scouring right there.
We should get comfortable. This might be a long turn.
I think you're right. I think it's going to be a very long turn. And what this Pyromancer Ascension angle has added to this Is It Phoenix deck, this is scary stuff. Like, this is a top-tier deck, absolutely.
It is. I kind of badmouthed the Ascensions at first, but from watching it play out, it's like, obviously people are coming at you with a bunch of hate. And it's not like Leyline of the Void hate, really. It is soft graveyard hate like Surgical Extraction, Nile Spellbomb, stuff like that. And it just doesn't do enough against Ascension.
No, you're spot on. I think the earliest attempts to integrate this card into the deck misstepped a little bit. They went a little bit harder than they needed to. I occasionally saw things like Noxious Revival or the full 4 copies. It doesn't need to be that flashy. You can just play a couple copies of this card and it'll be good in so many situations. Pete picking up another nice one as well. He's got the Shatterstorm in hand now. I like the way things are going for Pete right now. Here comes some Arclight Phoenixes. They're going to get in some early damage.
Pete remembered his Arclight Phoenix triggers. That's good. That's
very good stuff.
It's not step 1. This is about step 7 on this turn. But
Been a lot of steps.
It was an important one.
A lot of steps for sure.
And Zan decided it's time. Gonna cash in Sword of the Meek to Thopter Foundry, make a 1/1 blue artifact Thopter, trigger Sword of the Meek. That's gonna return to the battlefield.
If you're on Zan's side and you're looking across the table at Pete, who's got an active Pyromancer Ascension, has a Chandra, Torch of Defiance, has 2 Arclight Phoenixes already attacking you, how are you finding a way out of the situation? What do you see as your outs right now?
There are a couple things. I think that barring Pyromancer Ascension, Zan was actually in a really good spot. He had Thopter Foundry, Sword of the Meek, he had Ensnaring Bridge, Whir of Invention also, but Pyromancer Ascension allowed Pete to just kind of run away with the game, draw a bunch of cards, which normally these decks aren't capable of doing. And in that scenario, I think facing down an Ascension, Zan probably had to get a little bit more aggressive with the Thopter Foundry rather than playing it super safe. Because you're not going to beat an active Ascension. You just aren't.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Pete going to go ahead and fire off an Abrade here. That's going to take out a Mox Opal, I believe.
And
as well as the Thopter Foundry. Yeah, not much left on Zan's side now. Pete finally ready to pass the turn, I believe, after what feels like 20 minutes of just enjoying the fruits of Pyromancer Ascension.
Ages.
Zan going to go ahead and take a draw here. See an Opal in hand, see Ensnaring Bridge. Has some plays, but it just feels like Pete has it all right now.
Nah, you can do some stuff if you're Zan. And you might even be able to deploy Ensnaring Bridge and stop the Phoenixes from attacking you. It's not going to stop the Chandra. It's not going to stop the Pyromancer Ascension. He's probably going to need to find Engineered Explosives for 2 to remove the Ascension. I imagine that is basically the only out that he has to that.
Yep.
Could also just try and assemble like Bridge plus Witchbane Orb and hope that Pete doesn't have the Shatterstorm already.
Okay. Has the Muddle in hand, so there's that.
He does. He just doesn't have the amount of resources to be able to like do thing plus hold up and counterspell. He doesn't have that luxury.
You're right. Here comes a Whir of Invention. I think that's Whir for 1. Anticipating Pithing Needle here.
That would be my guess. That's deals with one of the threats. You have the Thopter with Sword of the Meek to block an incoming Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Here is that Pithing Needle. I would bet a lot of money that's naming Chandra Torch of Defiance will, of course, confirm that. And now I have confirmation. Pete going to go ahead and take a draw here. I think we found a Faithless Looting. Already had a Serum Visions. These cantrips, when they get copied, man, just out of control. Pete drew his second copy of Pyromancer Ascension there. Now, if you're Pete, are you looking to slow roll that Pyromancer's Ascension? Do you want to be able to rebuild if you do face down Engineered Explosives, or is it just time to kick it into overdrive, trigger that probably this turn if he goes ahead and deploys it?
Given the Engineered Explosives, I think that he should almost certainly hold back on playing the second copy of Ascension. I also think that he just has enough to do with his mana this turn. He's probably going to, like, he's using Serum Visions to set up, to find more copies of Manamorphose to give him more mana on this turn, and he's going to try and put probably all 4 Arclight Phoenixes onto the battlefield.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Here we see a Manamorphose, the ultra-powered version, drawing 2 cards, producing 4 mana.
I think it would be tempting this turn to probably go after the Shatterstorm, especially if you're going to bring back all of the Phoenixes. But I don't think you need to use that quite yet. So I think
I agree.
If I were in Pete's spot, the one thing that I would be trying to do is set up lethal for next turn with Shatterstorm backup.
Makes a lot of sense. Pete also drew some Spell Pierces here. I believe 2 of them.
That's actually not bad.
It's great. I mean, they're pay 4, counter the opposing spell, and now it seems super unlikely that Muddle the Mixture will ever have any impact on this game.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't even considering the copy aspect of it.
Right.
And I still thought it was great. Because this game is still early.
Yeah.
And Zan is super land-wide.
Oh, absolutely. Here come those Phoenixes. They're going to get in for 6. That Thopter wearing the Sword of the Meek is going to block one of the Phoenixes. But the clock is ticking against Zan here. Going to go ahead, take a draw.
Can you imagine how Pete feels right now? He's used to just grinding it out with like blue-white and Jeskai control decks and stuff. This deck is a different animal entirely.
Right, he's like that unlimited power meme where he's just embracing all of the things this deck is able to do.
I don't understand memes. And you're older than I am. How do you understand memes?
I spend too much time on the internet.
I mean, me too. We're just in different places, I guess.
Yeah, but you're constantly gaming, whereas I'm constantly accomplishing nothing. So I think that's the difference.
You could argue that we're doing the same thing.
Well, that may be true. So Zan was able to find another Thopter Foundry here. Has the Sword of the Meek combo online once again. We know, unlikely to be impactful. Pete just draws another Metamorphose here. Gonna go ahead and fire that off. Drawing a couple cards, making a bunch of mana.
Get those mana counters back out here. We need to know what's going on.
Pete says, nah, I know what I'm doing here. Shatterstorm. Get wrecked. And Zan says that's going to be enough. Extends the hand, and the team of Rubin, Ingram, and Skarren are advancing to our finals here at SCG Cincinnati.
Shatterstorm and then copy it.
Yeah, not bad. So I think we have some explaining to do, Jared.